This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Melinda Kiefer, and welcome to Live Green, Tennessee, where we take you across our great state to explore agriculture, agritourism, sustainable living practices, and so much more. In this episode, we talked to Jimmy Reilly at the 93rd Annual Putnam County Fair in Cookeville, Tennessee, to learn about what it takes to fabricate objects out of iron by hot and cold forging on an anvil working as a blacksmith. Then we visit Sarah Pollock, landscape artist located in Knoxville, Tennessee, who often sees the world with the volume turned up. Sarah sets up her easel streamside in the Smoky Mountains or in a parking lot near a city street. In both cases, she says she's finding the beauty of everyday surroundings of the volunteer state. And finally, we sit down with Natalie Bumgarner at the 11th Annual Fall Gardeners Festival in Crossville, Tennessee, who is the University of Tennessee's Residential and Consumer Extension Specialist with responsibilities for education content and development of programming across our beautiful state. All this on the next episode of Live Green, Tennessee. Located in Cookeville, Tennessee, Jimmy Reilly sits down with us at the 93rd Annual Putnam County Fair to discuss why he loves working with metal and how he's turned his passion into a business with the Angry Ironsmith. Let's look at his incredible ironwork and the steps he takes to mold iron, starting with just a simple idea.
My company's name is the Angry Ironsmith. I create anything that you can imagine out of scrap steel, old rebar. I've reused cast iron skillets to engrave words on, pretty much anything. Tonight I'll be making a tomahawk out of a ball peen hammer. People give me reclaimed steel all the time. I get some from local vendors in Putnam County and the surrounding counties. There is a huge network of blacksmiths around that are happy to help and hand out steel all the time. Last year I was invited to be here, and this year they just called me back. Apparently I had people coming all the way from Nashville and Knoxville just to see me doing demos and to look at my wares. We're here at the Putnam County Fair at the barnyard just by the south gate entrance. I heat metal up between 1500 and 2000 degrees depending on what I'm doing, and at that point it acts a lot like Play-Doh and clay, and the hammer just happens to move it in whatever direction I need it to. There are many specifically shaped tools that do certain processes, and each hammer has its own strengths and weaknesses. The smaller pieces like the hooks and the steak flippers and the horseshoe fish, I can knock 5 or 6 of those out in about 30 minutes. The bigger projects like the pot rack or the tripod, they take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. Becoming a blacksmith is something that I've always wanted to do, growing up reading the iconic books and watching the movies of Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and all that. It's always something that I wanted to do. I want to create something from nothing. And in my early 20s, I got tired of waiting for the tools and the knowledge and picked up a hammer and started doing it by myself. I like the idea of taking something that's cold and hard and sharp and showing people that it can be fluid and delicate at the same time. And I love making the flowers the most because you take these things that are, inanimate and static, and you can give them movement with a hammer. It's a tremendous feeling to take a hammer and smack some stuff around, and in the end you end up with something beautiful. I started by digging a hole in the ground and lighting a fire and using a hairdryer for an air source. And then I grabbed a sledgehammer and was using that as an anvil for a couple years. And then I slowly upgraded and bought tools and was handed things by older smiths who saw my hunger and drive. Blacksmithing is very therapeutic for me. I almost zone out when it happens, and then at the end of it I come to and realize that I've made this beautiful thing out of a straight piece of metal. It's physically therapeutic You know, it stretches and uses a bunch of your muscles, and you know, it keeps you fit, and it helps you take your frustrations from the world out. And at the end of the day, I just feel so much better about myself and the things that I'm doing. I have currently got shop space right off of the O'Connor exit on 111, and I'll start teaching classes again here in Putnam County. I enjoy teaching classes the most. That is my favorite part about this, is taking people and showing them how to do this and seeing that aha moment when they realize this is what they're talking about, and I made this out of something cold and hard. I've taught classes out of Wilson County Fairgrounds in Lebanon for a couple years, and here soon, now that I've got some shop space in Putnam County, I'll start teaching here. I teach beginner lessons unless somebody comes in with a working knowledge already, so the curriculum is based off of what their working knowledge of it is. At this moment, I would teach you how to make a hook. It shows a bunch of the fundamentals. You have to measure, you have to have an idea and a design in your head. You draw out and make a taper for your end, you can twist, and then you have to make the mounting part of it, and you have to flatten it out, and then you have to punch holes. It's deceptively complicated. You know, how easy a hook looks, it can be very complicated. There are probably fewer working blacksmiths than there were 200 years ago, but the craft is in its renaissance. I have met thousands of blacksmiths here in the last couple years, and a lot of them are in Tennessee and the surrounding states. It is very much a southern thing, and I think that that's fantastic. You know, nearly every fairgrounds has a blacksmith shop, and where I live here in Putnam County, I'm only 15 minutes away from a dozen other blacksmiths. The coffee table that I made was a customized piece. I was contacted by a person who was using an ottoman as their coffee table, and they were always spilling their drinks and everything else because it's a cushion. So I made this tremendously awesome table, and it had 2 copper flowers underneath the glass top that I patinaed with salt and vinegar to give it that green, old look. Custom pieces. I also make knives. Knives are expensive to do, and they require a lot of work, so I don't keep them on the table because can't afford to have a bunch of money sitting out on the table and no one buying it. The tools that you need to be a blacksmith, you can use nearly anything to get started. Like I said, I started with a sledgehammer head as an anvil and a ball peen hammer, and then I was using vice grips instead of tongs. You know, you work with what you got, and that's kind of our motto, and I think that that's a beautiful thing, that we can make something from nothing. I currently use both types of fuel. I use a propane because it's more portable and it's cleaner and it doesn't smell bad, and at home when I'm making anything with a third dimension, I use coal. And you know, you end up with 2 very different products. The metal, as it gets hotter, absorbs the carbon out of the coal, therefore becoming harder in the end. The propane I use normally when I'm making blades because it's a straight channel. Anytime you gain volume or that third dimension, it simply won't fit. This propane forge is a 3-burner Majestic knife maker's forge, and I can get it up to 22 or 2300 degrees depending on what I need it to do. And the metal, I can get the metal to start bending at a red heat. That's about 1000 degrees, 1300. I can weld steel together once it gets up to 22, and it's almost a liquid state. Then I fold it over to where the 2 ends touch, make sure the connection is clean, smack it with a hammer a couple times, and it's one piece. You can get started blacksmithing by reaching out through Facebook or Instagram to any of the local chapters around. There is Abana that runs through 7 states, I believe. There is Fiddler's Grove Blacksmith Association in Lebanon, Tennessee. I'm working on revitalizing our blacksmith chapter here in Putnam County here soon. That's my big project for the next 5 years, is to get a location and get something going. But I mean, all you got to do is just reach out to the right channels and ask, and everybody knows a blacksmith, whether they know it or not. We're everywhere.
We start in Sarah Pollock's indoor and outdoor studio, where this newcomer is dedicated to capturing the beauty that is uniquely Tennessee and whose paintings capture a range of subjects from dynamic, down-the-street views to intimate portraits of anonymous individuals.
I'm Sarah Pollock, and I'm a professional painter. I specialize in landscapes and cityscapes, so a contrast between urban and rural subjects. I've been painting for over 15 years. I began in the medium of pastel, and more recently in the past 5 years transitioned into oil painting, but the one consistent thread across those two different media is I've always specialized in those two subjects. I appreciate the variety and the counterpoint. You'll encounter stories and colors and cityscapes that you may not find out in nature, but at the same time there's no greater opportunity, like on a beautiful day, to go outside and work in the field in an outdoor office, and so I enjoy both subjects. So getting out and getting acquainted with a place is really essential to my process and identity as an artist. I really like to celebrate the beauty that's around us every day, and as a newcomer I like to think that I can bring a fresh vision to that. Sometimes when we've called a place a home for a long time, maybe we lose touch with some of the things that are really beautiful about it. And when I come in and I'm brand new to a place, it's just really important to gain an understanding of the history, some of the stories behind a place. I really enjoy that as part of my process. Because I enjoy cityscapes, I was very enamored of Knoxville itself. I like the industrial history as well as even the more recent history through the Civil War. I was very intrigued by that and just the people and the stories behind the city. And then of course we ventured up to the Smoky Mountains. Had to go see that and start to learn some of the intricacies of the paths and some of the more hidden aspects of the park. And so I've really enjoyed that contrast again between the urban and the natural. When I'm out in the field, I have to make kind of quick, snap decisions in response to the light, and I have a very small block of time in which to work. But I really love to come back and take those ideas and sort of mull them over a bit more and then blow them up into something bigger in my studio. Before I began working full-time as a painter, I worked for Walt Disney Feature Animation. I was a color stylist for them in their Orlando, Florida studio, and there my responsibility was to set the color and final appearance of scenes before they went to film. The training I received there was excellent, and I now use that to this day in my own artwork. This is a result of a trip up to the Smoky Mountains, one of my first visits up to the park. So it was a beautiful summer day, starting to transition into fall just a little bit, so those first hints of color. This was painted on location, and as I like to say, in my outdoor office, right along the Middle Prong River. Really, there's a great sensibility of light there that's so different from where I came from, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of living here. In contrast to some of the landscape work that I do, this is a piece, this is along Magnolia Avenue here in Knoxville, and it's called Free Service, and it's all about the vivid colors and graphical elements on that particular summer day in downtown Knoxville. I was just very drawn to the light and the beautiful colors throughout. So I actually was taking a bicycle to be serviced, and I saw that, and again, it was all about the light and shadow, just that moment. Another piece that celebrates downtown Knoxville is right here. This is called Kingston Twilight, and this is right along Kingston Pike near our home. And again, it kind of exemplifies that importance of proper timing. I just happened to catch a beautiful sunset that night, and when you have the right lights, like even something that you pass by every day can become elevated into a wonderful subject. One of them is it's an interesting little piece. It's called Blue. And it's a painting that I found the inspiration for it while I was downtown in Knoxville, and it's a surface parking lot, but I really liked the graphical and linear elements as well as the old buildings like the orange in contrast to the beautiful blue sky that day and the billowing clouds. I think it kind of exemplifies like the beauty of what's here with our Smoky Mountains and our environment and the clouds, as well as just the history of the city right underneath as a foreground element. There are definitely instances where people relate to paintings even if it isn't necessarily right in their geographical area, and to me that speaks to maybe successfully capturing the mood and the color. Like there can be a universality to a subject that is broadly appealing, and that's great. I mean, if that gives people an entry into a work and allows them to access the subject, then all the better. There are definitely instances where, I'll choose, for example, like a rainy day scene, because the reflections on a rainy day, especially in the city, like in the asphalt, I find those captivating. And a lot of times I'll have people say to me, oh, I never thought of like a cold rainy day as something that could be so alluring. But again, that's part of my job as an artist, is to try to show you the world in a new way. As far as a favorite spot, it's interesting. It's very consistent for me, that interest between urban and rural. And so right now I would have to say it's a toss-up between working within the history of Knoxville and kind of its industrial history and looking at the buildings and the architecture and the streets, or totally completely different, going up to, of course, the Smoky Mountains and just, retreating for a day and, pulling off and doing work right along the streams. I like both of those about equally. They're very different, and it really allows me to get up each day and say, okay, depending upon the lighting or the weather circumstance, I can tailor work and subjects to whatever's happening, and allows me to be more responsive in the work and really make the best of a subject. I travel throughout the eastern United States to exhibit my work at outdoor art shows. These are usually weekend events where you set up and do a display, and I love to think of myself as an ambassador for the area that I'm representing in my artwork, and so it's really fun to have people who have lived in an area for a long time and they come up and see something in a painting that they never recognized before, and I like to share with them any history or backstory behind a subject, why I chose it, and hopefully kind of showcase to them why something's really special. Specifically, I would say a lot of times my landscapes in state parks, people don't realize what's within a day's drive or even just an hour's drive. Being able to celebrate that with them and show them hey, this is right here pretty much in your backyard, and it encourages people to get out and see things for themselves, and I like to be able to do that.
Located at Plateau Research and Education Center in Crossville, Tennessee, at the 11th Annual Fall Gardeners Festival, we sit down with Professor Natalie Bumgarner, who discusses how the Department of Plant Sciences at the University of Tennessee conducts academic, outreach, and research programs in agriculture, natural resources, plant sciences throughout Tennessee.
I'm the Residential and Consumer Horticulture Extension Specialist, and I also am the Master Gardener Coordinator for the state of Tennessee. So what that really means is I get to work in research and teaching extension outreach in all areas of home horticulture, residential lawns, landscapes, and vegetable gardens, as well as working with our Master Gardener volunteers who do great teaching and service and outreach across our entire state. My background is in vegetable production. So the opportunity that I have here with my job at UT is I get to work with vegetable gardeners across the state. And so teaching, but also research, both on our research stations like this one, as well as with citizen science projects with gardeners all over the state. So our citizen science project is the Home Garden Variety Trial. And really the premise is it's important for researchers to do replicated studies on research stations, but we can't do that in a way that represents what everybody's growing climate is across a very diverse state like Tennessee. So then we combine what we do on our research stations with gardeners who are growing the same varieties in their backyard gardens across Tennessee and then sending us back in that data. And it helps us be able to recommend great cultivars that perform well in our climate for home gardeners across the state. So we're here at the Fall Gardeners Festival, which is one of our favorite examples of the collaboration between extension and master gardeners and agricultural research that takes place at UTIA. So we're at what we call a research and education center, where a lot of everything from animal to row crop to vegetable research takes place here. But also here on this site, the master gardeners over the past 15 years or so have installed and led and invested in a fabulous demonstration garden here. And because we have this great facility and a dedicated group of volunteers who work with their county extension and with the research personnel here on this station, we have the opportunity to have these great educational field days. So this is free and open to the public, and all throughout the entire day there are great educational presentations, everything from hydrangeas and ornamentals to hearing about the vegetable trials, straw bale gardening, tomatoes, turf. Some are taught by our great volunteers. Some are taught by extension specialists and personnel from extension or research. And so that's really the point of our research and education centers and of our Master Gardener program, to touch people in communities with great educational opportunities. All of the state has great pluses for home gardeners, but there are certain crops that grow better in different seasons and different parts of the state. So one of the advantages of the Upper Cumberland is that it tends to be one of our cooler growing regions. And so, to take right now, for instance, my tomatoes in Knoxville are really on the decline. It's been a hot summer and my productivity is going down. Whereas here on the Upper Cumberland, it's been a little bit cooler. The plants may have gotten started later, so their warm season crops may produce a little bit later into the summer than they would in the valley or, in middle or west Tennessee. So it's not a better or worse, but it's about being able to take advantage of the assets of different climates. It's true for vegetables, it's true for fruit crops, right? Different types of blueberries, say, might grow better in West Tennessee versus East Tennessee, but we might be able to grow some things here on the Upper Cumberland that wouldn't do well in the warmer parts of our state. So it's really all about matching to get the advantage. Over the last, 10 or 15 years, homeowners have a much wider slate of organic materials to use because as commercial organic production has moved forward, a lot of those materials become available for home gardeners. So we have a wider range of fertilizer materials, right? It used to be really hard to find a complete organic fertilizer, and by complete I mean having N, P, and K, right? So fertilizer materials are easier to get a hold of. Sometimes they're now a little bit easier to find in more soluble forms, so that you might be able to dissolve them or put them through your drip irrigation. So that can be an asset, as well as the traditional materials like bone meal, blood meal, the composts that have worked well for organic gardeners for years. The other asset is that when it comes to disease and insect management, there are a lot of new materials that are available. So we have a lot of biological materials like bacterial products that are naturally derived that can be great for caterpillar, right? For tomato hornworm, one of our favorites, for yellow striped armyworm, a lot of those types of pests. And so we also have biological materials that can be good for disease control, especially preventive. When it comes to organic management, and conventional organic management for that matter, for home gardeners, we want to focus on applying materials before we see widespread disease issue, because they're going to be more effective to prevent infection than they are curatively. So those are a lot of the publications that we have available for home gardeners through Extension, as well as a lot of the presentations that we do at locations just like here at the Plateau Discovery Gardens. One of the great things that we really see a lot more in home gardening, whether it be for landscapes or for vegetable gardens, is that we're a lot more conscious of our water and soil stewardship. And those often, they come together, right? So how we protect our soil surfaces to prevent erosion can also be how we allow better water infiltration into our soil. But what we're seeing a lot of are rain barrels and water capture. So it provides small-scale homeowners the opportunity to collect water from rooftops or from other locations, and then even apply it as drip irrigation on their garden. In terms of soil management, this is an area where gardeners right now, and it's exciting to see, are using a lot of different methods that in many ways are kind of scaled down versions of what our commercial producers would use. So the traditional method would be to use tillage in the spring and oftentimes in the fall. Some of the other exciting techniques that we're seeing more commonly for home gardeners is to use lower till methods, right? So our commercial row crop producers have been doing no-till production for corn and soybeans and other crops in Tennessee for decades. And now we see some of those techniques being replicated on a smaller scale in the home garden. And so there can be benefits to not tilling up the soil because you retain that soil structure, which allows water to infiltrate. You allow the microbial communities to aggregate those soil particles, fungi and some of those soil microbes. And it can also prevent loss of organic matter, because when we till, then that exposes that organic matter to loss. So we're seeing both stewardship using traditional methods, cover crops, but we're also seeing stewardship using newer no-till methods. So those can all be tailored to the site, to the gardener, to the machinery that they have and what works for them. There are lots of great crops that can work well for beginner gardeners. If you're growing in a container or if you're growing in a raised bed, there are lots of compact cucumbers and peppers that can really work well for you. We have a lot of information on those cultivars and how to grow those resources on our horticulture website, which is uthort.com, and you can find lots of those great resources that can fit a wide range of gardeners at different scales. So what I generally try to say to early stage home gardeners is start small. Don't get overwhelmed. Build yourself a 4x4 or 4x8 raised bed and enjoy it. Plant some compact tomatoes or peppers for the summer. Put in some cabbage or kale or spinach for the fall. And just experiment with a few things to get your feet wet, read some resources, learn a little bit about the options, and find out what works for you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Live Green Tennessee, where we take you across our state into the farms and businesses of those who are making the moves to eating fresh, living sustainably, and helping us all be more organic in our thinking and the way we live our lives as Tennesseans. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Live Green Tennessee.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.